Alright, so I'm going to get started because I have about 9 hours for the content, and we only have about 1 hour to do this, so that was probably the biggest challenge I had in this, really trying to cram it all in because this is really kind of a big topic. So I'll probably just be like, oh hey, you might want to use Knockout for this. I'm not going to talk about it, but go use it. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about single page applications. And I spent about 4 hours working on this image. No, I'm just kidding. So I hope you like the images. And I thought, we'll talk about, we'll have like spot theme, Seriously? Seriously? Come on.
I had it muted for a little bit.
Alright, so, about me. This was shamelessly copy-pasted from a previous presentation. In fact, most of this entire presentation was rehashed because I gave this at Code Camp in the Twin Cities last month. So, my name is Bullinger, if you haven't figured that one out. And I use the username vBullinger everywhere, every email career you could imagine, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, because I don't really have a whole lot of competition for vBullinger. The only other vBullinger in the world I know is my dad Vern, and he barely knows where the power button is. So, I'm an independent .NET developer, don't have an employer, I do whatever various contract work suits me and whatever interests me. I have been married since May of 2008. I live in St. Paul, like I said, I gave this at the Twin Cities Code Camp last month. And I graduated from Worcester Polytechnic Institute over in Massachusetts in 2004. I am from the Twin Cities. I just happened to want to go out there because they have a lot of great schools out east. But I went out there and it's a little different out there. We have Minnesota nice and they refer to themselves as massholes. So after I graduated, I came right on back to great state of Minnesota and been here ever since. I have a 1-year-old daughter named Zena. She was born last 4th of July. So pretty cool to be born to libertarian parents on the 4th of July. Anyway, so I've been a .NET consultant and developer since 2005. I've mainly been a consultant and I kind of worked for various companies. I didn't work for ILM, but companies like ILM. Worked for Inedium, now they're called Avtex, and Solution Design Group, stuff like that. And eventually I said, all right, I'm going to do this independently so I can get the right gigs that I want. And I go to various user groups. First, when I graduated from college, I was like, well, okay, now I got this .NET job, but I didn't learn .NET in college, so I'm going to try to get better at that. And then I said, okay, what's the best way to do that? Thought I'd get certified. After I got my full-on CSD in 2008, I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I started getting a little more involved in the community, started going to different user groups and things like that, reading different blogs and magazines and whatever, and going to things like Code Camp. And one thing I came across was a group called TechMasters. You didn't notice I'm wearing a shirt right now. And that was probably the best professional decision I've made in my life. Now, I don't know, anybody else from the Twin Cities at all? Anybody whatsoever? Honestly? Really? No? Nobody? That's weird. So, like, what? Everybody, like, half the presenters here are from the Twin Cities, but nobody... I've been here before without presenting. Not that far. It's like an hour or so. Well, I guess this is going to be a tough sell to get you guys to come to TechMasters in Edina on Tuesday mornings at 7:40 a.m. But, you know what? It's a Toastmasters group, so... Toastmasters are international, if you don't know what they are. It's basically a speaking club. And you go there to practice your speaking skills. Because, well, let's face it, we're all developers here, and what do when we go home? We go in our basement and play World of Warcraft, right? We don't really have much human interaction. So, a guy by the name of Mike Benkovich, if you don't know him, you should, because he's a big name developer in the Midwest. And he kind of goes around the world giving presentations and stuff like that. And he was in a Toastmasters group. But they were all realtors. So he wanted to practice his material and was like, oh, there's this cool new thing for Azure. Well, the realtors don't really know what the heck he's talking about. So he couldn't use his material. And so he started his own IT group. He's like, hey, we don't know how to talk to each other. We don't have any communication skills. I'm sure there are a lot of nerds that want to start a Toastmasters group. So he did, and it's probably the biggest, best thriving Toastmasters chapter in the Twin Cities. So, you can't go, but whatever. Maybe you should start your own. And there have been talks of spreading it to other places. So if you can't go to TechMasters, maybe look into your local Toastmasters. If you want to improve your communication skills at work, maybe you want to be a manager, or a mid-level executive, whatever it is. We have people who have English as a second language and just want to communicate with their coworkers better. Or maybe you want to be a presenter at user groups, conferences, stuff like that. Maybe you want to be an evangelist or whatever. whatever your goals are, I highly recommend Toastmasters. So, today's agenda. What is a single page application? A lot of confusion around that one. Why should you care? Just knowing about it, should you actually use it? Brief history of single page applications, how they came to be and kind of state what they are. How do they work? And we're going to have kind of a hodgepodge of single page application approaches and technologies because it's not one technology. It's kind of a general philosophy of how to develop an application. Now, the last part here, you see buzzword bingo. Wait a second. Oh, sorry. When I gave this talk at the Twin Cities Code Camp last month, we did play buzzword bingo. But I was trolling everybody. See, I had 13 cards, and I made a few copies of each of them so that everyone had a card, and nobody knew. But as things were going along, you'd mark off what I was saying, and when I said QUnit, everybody went at the same time. So I figured, what if the word got out and the joke was ruined? So in the meantime, I'm still going to start up that app. I have a XAML application, a little WPF thing, and it's actually listening to what I'm saying. Apparently I said tech message Web 3 already, but anyway. So what it's doing is it's listening to what I'm saying, and as I say things, it will mark it down in a database that I said it. It seems to really be a little bit sensitive, though, I've noticed. So, all right, first things first. Who knows a thing or two about spas? Kind of, all right. One. Anybody worked on a single-page application at all, or anything that could be kind of sort of like one? All right, 3/4. All right, so I can kind of make up things, and you guys are just going to have to take my word for it. Awesome. Love when that happens. And you'll never give me any tough questions. That's the best. All right, so what is a spa? Steve Sanderson, a high-ranking member of Microsoft team, had a presentation at Tech Days earlier this year, and he says that single-page applications are rich, responsive applications combining the best of web and desktop, filled with HTML and JavaScript. So the idea is that it is responsive as a desktop application, but as portable as a web application. From the book, Single Page Web Applications, put out by Manny Press, they say a SPA is an application delivered to the browser that does not reload the page during use. So when you're clicking around, when you're doing stuff, you're not making a post back to the server. We can think of a SPA as a fat client that is loaded from a web server. So you have to kind of divorce the idea of a server serving whole entire pages. You're more along the lines of getting an application and all of what you need for your application delivered to you, and then the browser, the client, does the vast majority of the work. Instead of saying, okay, I need something, go figure it out on the server and deliver me the final product. So here's my own words. The performance of a desktop application. You're not, like I said, there's no flickering. When you click something, the page doesn't unload and then go back to the server and then reload a whole new thing. You don't see any kind of flicker like that. It has the portability of a website so that it's going to be, any device that can run a browser can run your SPA. It is not a single technology like I was saying before. Typically when I'm giving presentations, it's like, okay, here's a cool new thing for Silverlight, or here's a cool new, MVC trick, whatever. And here's what it is, here's all the things you need to learn about it, here's some examples of it, and that's it. It's a little different. This one's quite a bit harder to put together because I can't just go, okay, what's the SPA, and then go grab a few things, and then I've got my template about exactly what to do for a single page application. It's kind of more like a general philosophy or approach about how to build something. So you could use 10 different technologies to do one thing, and you can kind of pick what you want. I'm going to offer some suggestions. So I certainly would like to hear any input you guys have as far as what would be a good fit for that. And you're probably going to run into a few things where you're like, I've actually done some things like that that could be kind of single-page application. So, Velociraptor wonders, if I follow SPA guidelines but I have 2 pages, do I all of a sudden not have SPA? So this kind of gets to the crux of the matter that I don't like the name. We have, in my humble opinion, I think that SPA is a bad name. And I'll keep saying SPA instead of single-page application because I don't like the name. it kind of emphasizes the single page aspect, which is not a requirement at all whatsoever. The idea isn't like, oh, it's so cool that we only have one page. The idea is that, and it's kind of de-emphasizing or even ignoring all the other aspects of it. So it's kind of saying, it's so cool that we have one page, and we're not even going to worry about what's so important about a single page application or why it's so cool. It's probably a transitional term, and we're probably going to come up with something a little better. And I offer, how about just an app or a web app? Because what is it really? When you think about an app on your phone, for example, what is it? It's a self-contained thing, and maybe it talks to a server a little bit to save some data. I don't know, what if your app's a game? And you're saving your high scores to the server to see if you had the... Really? Come on, man. There's 2 people already. That guy's getting kicked out. Alright, so I'm open to other suggestions, but the idea of a single-page application, as the name, is kind of bad because that's not what's important about it. So why should you care about single-page applications? Again, stolen directly from Steve Sanderson. He gave these 4 main benefits for single-page applications. A great user experience, which from his talk and from everybody else, great means fast. That doesn't mean, oh, you're really going to love using this because it's super cool and looks really good. That's not what they mean by a great user experience. You can't just like automatically get that out of the box. The idea is that it's very responsive. When you hit enter on Facebook, when in your comment, when you're telling people to shut up about the elections or whatever, and you hit enter, well, it instantaneously does something to you. It doesn't post back and say, okay, here's a comment, go post that to the database and then rebuild the page and give it back to you. No, it says, okay, here I'm going to put the comment right there on the page for you, and your friends probably aren't going to see it for another few seconds or a minute or something, because on the back side, yeah, sure, it goes and saves that comment, but your friends won't see it necessarily right away. Runs on any device that has a browser, boom, single page application loads up right away. You don't have to write your app in iOS, Objective-C, and you don't have to worry about all that garbage. You can just go ahead and make your spot, and it's going to run on anything that has a browser. It can work offline, or at least that should be one of your goals of your spot. The ability to be able to work offline. So you're going to keep whatever information that you might need to sync up with the server lying around, whether it be in just your JavaScript variables, or if it's a little more sophisticated, or if you need to, you might want to use HTML5 local storage. And here I kind of crossed this one out, and even Steve said, don't worry about it, it's kind of advanced. And he didn't demo it either. I kind of say, never mind that part, because it's kind of .NET-centric. You don't need to be using .NET in order to make a spot. But anyway, App Store deployable. The one thing you can think about is if you have a fully working spot, all written in JavaScript and HTML5 and everything, you can zip it up using something like PhoneGap, and then boom, you have a cross-browser app that works and acts like a normal app and doesn't look like your typical crappy web page. It's going to look like a nice app. Alright, so technologies. Again, he has nice slides, so I'm just stealing them. So, the basic architecture here is, on the server side we have web UI, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, delivered to the client side. And then it kind of takes the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript and builds your basic original startup page, whatever it is that you're happening to do. And then from here on out, you only communicate. You notice that none of these arrows go back except right here. When you need to communicate with the data access layer, whether it's a database or you're just posting things to some RESTful APIs, whatever it is, you don't have to go back. You're not saying, here, I've made a change, I'm going to go back to the server, you figure out the change and then deliver me the whole new page again. You don't do that. You do all that processing on the client side. And if the server needs to know about your new high score in your game or needs to authorize something, well, then you can go ahead and talk to them. But in the meantime, hopefully you're doing as little as possible. And everything is going on as much here as you can. So your visible part, HTML, CSS, and then whatever your business logic is, whatever's actually happening, you're going to use hopefully just JavaScript. And over here you have your navigation APIs. Well, if you only have one page, you're not going to other pages, you're going to probably run into the idea of wanting to be able to go back and forward, and things like that, and trying to get to certain states within your application. So, for example, if you click on this, that, the other thing, you want to be able to maybe bookmark that because it's not a page anymore, right? So you start using the pound, you know, like a lot of, if you go to Twitter, for example, you'll notice a lot of times you see a pound and then a whole bunch of stuff over here. That's because you're on the same page no matter what you're doing. So that's the kind of thing you do. And there are navigation APIs you can use to make that a little easier. And for your data access layer, so you got to actually communicate with your server, yeah, you got to save some data, you got to go get some more data. Then you actually go back and you use JavaScript to go talk to the server and get JSON or XML if you're living in the 2008 or something. All right, now, like I said, hopefully at some point you're really almost never coming back here and you're doing just about everything on the client side. And hopefully you can get everything available offline. And if you need to, you can use HTML5 local storage. Now, here are some specifics of what you could do for each of these individual parts. There's a million different things. You can't go over them all, so you'll have to bear with me. And like I said, if you have ideas for what you can do, go ahead and share them, because this is not sort of, like I said, it isn't, here's how to do it, here's what it is, and here's exactly the template of how to build this font. So you can swap out any part you want. Of course, Steve Stanis is very .NET-centric, so you're going to see some .NET stuff. You don't need to use .NET at all. In fact, I'm going to give this talk at the JavaScript User Group in the Twin Cities at the end of the month, and I'm going to rip out anything about .NET. I'm going to make like a node server, you know, on the back end. So anyway, over here, what serves the web UI? You might have MVC, you might have web forms, you might have web matrix, whatever. And that's going to give you your starting point for the page. And for the visible UI, on the front end, for your binding and just keeping everything in place, Knockout.js is a really good example. I'm not just saying it because Steve said it, I'm saying it because it's super cool. I'll get into it a little bit, but I really don't have enough time to really get into how awesome Knockout.js is. So I recommend you check it out on your own time. For the application layer, various JavaScript frameworks could be used. Maybe that's where your back-end idea, your back-end logic is. And between these two layers, you could use, for example, they say Upshot, but I'm going to tell you don't look at that right now. Because when he made this in, I don't know, April, February, or something like that, they were actively working on Upshot. And just before I gave this presentation at the Twin Cities Code Camp, they put out a press release saying, you know what, we're not going to work on Upshot anymore. And they also had a single-page application project type Visual Studio that they were working on. And they said, we're not going to do that anymore. Thanks, .NET. All right, so for right here, a really good, one thing that I would suggest would be Backbone.js. That is, I would say that's basically MVC for JavaScript. I would say Knockout would be MVVM for JavaScript, and I would say Backbone would be MVC for JavaScript. So two very good tools to look at, and you can combine them if you want. Two very good tools to look at for this layer of it. And I'll show some demos where I use Backbone. And then local storage, like I said, HTML5 is a good example. And for the navigation API, he mentions History.js. I can't even see a competitor for anything other than History.js for anything that I could recommend. So it's great, it works, definitely recommend it. And for .NET, when you're actually communicating with the server, over here they have Web API. Well, Web API lends itself very, very well to single-page applications because you're not serving pages, you're not serving HTML. You're just asking for a little bit of data. You know, I want all the information on the widget with ID of file. And then it gives you a tiny little JSON object that says, here's that widget. And then you take the JSON object and you plop it into your HTML however you want to do it. But like I said, that's being decided upon on the client side. So why should you care? Well, we've been moving in this direction for a very long time, and I'll go over a brief history of how we've developed into these single-page applications in a minute. Websites are expected to do more. You know, technology is barreling forward, and we're getting so much better at everything, and everything's getting so much more powerful. And websites are expected to do more. People are using Gmail, people are using Facebook and Twitter, and all these cool things are happening all of a sudden. And you know, if you're going to make a nice big size application, you might want to try to figure out ways to maximize the experience and make it as good as you can. So something like a single page application will help you get a better user experience and kind of get more out of the browser. Websites are expected to perform better. Like I said, it's kind of a continuation of the last point, but it kind of blends into the next one too. Proliferation of phones and tablets. How many people here have a smartphone? The vast majority. And tablets, iPad, anything? Okay. Significant number. I read a statistic recently that since 2009, mobile browsing has doubled every single year. 2009, 10, 11, 12. By that exact, if you were to extrapolate that out, in sometime in the year 2015, we will browse more on phones and tablets than we will on desktops and laptops. So right now, a lot of people probably are a little behind on mobile development. And you might think to yourself, well, that's okay, because that's just a little offshot minority over there. Well, in just 2+ years from now, you're going to be in the minority if you don't get on the bandwagon and catch up with mobile and development. And the reason why that's important to spas is because, well, your phone might be pretty cool, but that's going to be more powerful. So if this is going to connect the internet a lot faster and this is going to be a lot more powerful, maybe we should try to squeeze as much as we can out of these applications that we're serving here, right? Maybe your phone shouldn't be posted back to the server a million times. Maybe it should get the tiniest little bit of information that it needs from the server only when it needs it. And if it can figure it all out on its own in the client, on the browser, maybe that's a better way of doing it. So, and like I said, you could package up a spa as an app with something like PhoneGap pretty easily, and it's gonna work. It's gonna be a pretty good app. So, is a spa right for you? Yes, if you need a highly responsive site, or if you have a lot of moving parts, really dynamic, whatever. If you have a mobile app, like I just mentioned. No, if you have a very static site, very boring, bland, doesn't really do a whole lot. Mom and pop site, maybe you're running a little restaurant and you don't really have a lot of bells and whistles. You just have a nice pretty pictures and your dinner PDF, and that's really it, your location. No big deal, you don't really need that. Maybe you should just stick with the web matrix or whatever and get it done today or whatever. Or pull up a WordPress site and then it's 24 hours, no big deal. Or maybe you have a really linear, boring bank application type website. Maybe you're filling out a form for a mortgage application or whatever. You don't really need anything cool or dynamic or whatever. And I said that last month and someone was like, hey, I work for a bank, we do really cool stuff. All right, any other bank except for that guy. When in doubt, do it the cool, fun way, like a spa. So if your boss isn't sure, try to figure out whatever buzzwords you need to say to get him to allow you to make a spa. All right, so brief history of spas. Java applets. Yes, Java applets. What? How does that have to do with it? Why we're going back to those credit things? So when you think about what a Java applet is, it's something that you download and then it sticks on your client, and then it does as much as it can right there on your machine so that it doesn't have to go communicate to the server very much. So technically speaking, it's kind of like a really early, really crappy spa. And Flash kind of follows the same way. You download the whole app kind of up front, or at least as much as you can, and you do the heavy lifting on the client side. And if you need to go save your score from your Flash game or whatever, then it can go communicate to the server and just say, hi score, this person's ID or email address, and this is their score, and that's it. And they don't have to host the whole page back with the whole game information or whatever. In 1996, I introduced the iframe. Why is he talking about iframe? Why are we talking about single page application? Well, when you think about it, what is an iframe? It's a small portion of a page. Like let's say you have your header navigation, your side navigation, your footer, and they're all staying the same, right? You're building a page in 1996, and you have all this staying the same, and then you have the meat of the app changing when you're clicking around. What you're trying to do there is limit how much you're reloading. You're trying to limit what goes back and forth among the server, right? That's kind of the whole process toward spas. In 1999, I introduced the XML HTTP ActiveX control. It's kind of the big game changer where it really started heading into the asynchronous direction. And between 1999 and 2005, when somebody by the name of Jesse James Barrett coined the term Ajax. We had been tweaking and improving this ActiveX control for a long time and making it more cross-browser compatible and things like that. And we're getting more out of it. We're talking to the server asynchronously and trying to get information without having to make a whole huge giant postbag, trying to make a better website experience for people. In 2005, Steve Yen coined the term SPA as well. And you're like, boy, that's weird, 7-year-old term, and I hadn't really ever heard of it before today or whatever. Well, most of us never really worried about it because the idea of SPA wasn't really, it wasn't powerful enough. Like, the technologies that we had were not good enough, the browsers weren't good enough, JavaScript wasn't good enough to be able to really make these in any kind of large capacity. That's changing today. And Silverlight came out 2007. That's kind of the latest Java applet Flash type plugin for that we've had in any recent time. And if you ever done any Silverlight development, well, what are you really doing? You're delivering an application to the browser, and you're doing as much as you can on the client side, and you're communicating with the server as little as possible. Maybe use real services, for example, just to communicate with the database, whatever. And then, since then, we have things like the proliferation of MVC, not just .NET MVC, MVVM, whether it's through things like Silverlight or WPF, or things like Knockout.js. jQuery has obviously exploded in recent years. I mean, 2005, 2006, if you said, hey Vince, want to do some JavaScript development? I'd be like, I'd rather stick a fork in my eye. But nowadays, if you're like, hey, you want to do some JavaScript development? And be like, heck yeah, I want to do JavaScript development. This is cool. So things have changed quite a bit. So jQuery, of course, they adopted Ajax. We're going to talk about promises later. Anybody know what promises are? Yeah, one guy. All right. That knows everything, right? So, anyway, so promises are kind of they're a pretty cool way to kind of manage your asynchronous stuff. So for example, if you got 2 or 3 things happening all at once, you can use promises to kind of zip them together and say, when they're all done, then do this. Pretty cool. You can chain them, you can link them, whatever. Alright, so why is JavaScript winning? Why is JavaScript beating Silverlight, Flash, and Java applets? Technically speaking, still isn't your Silverlight app still better than JavaScript? Well, it's a very versatile, very mature language that's used everywhere. It's very well adopted, kind of ubiquitous. You don't need a plugin, so that kind of makes it a lot easier to get it to many different devices. No extra runtime. You don't have to download some mini version of the .NET runtime. Flash, Silverlight, Java applets, they really stick out, if you haven't noticed. It's not like it's just part of the page that blends in and you never really know. If that ever happens, you're just amazed, like, that was Flash? That never really happens. You're always like, oh, is that Flash? Right click, Adobe, whatever. It happens all the time. And of course, if you ever have a drop down, you ever notice this problem? You ever have a drop down menu and a flash is right below it. When you hover over the drop down goes beneath the flash. You're like, I wanted to click on that thing. You have to put some weird hack in it to fix it. They stick out. JavaScript blends in, it's ubiquitous, everybody has it. You don't have to do anything special about it. JavaScript and clients are getting a lot faster than they used to be. JavaScript used to be kind of slow and kind of crappy, and they've been working really hard to make that a lot better. And the clients are a lot faster, if you haven't noticed. Your computers are a lot better, and your browsers are a lot better. And look at something like Chrome, where they just say, get rid of all the crap, we're just going to make it as fast and awesome as possible. And, of course, your phones and your tablets are getting pretty nice, too. And I would imagine that in 5 or 10 years, you might not have one of those. You might just stick with your tablet. And, of course, things like HTML5, CSS3, and scalable vector graphics are getting to the point where you can do quite a bit, and the awesomeness of something like Silverlight is being kind of mitigated to the point where maybe it's not so necessary anymore. Maybe you don't need to use it. I remember I went to an HTML5 CSS3 talk at a code camp like last year or whatever, and this guy put up a video and it had a green screen. There was a guy drumming and he had a green screen on it. And just using HTML5 and JavaScript, that's it. Simple stuff that he could hack together in an hour. He put like background pictures on that video. He was like copying, like once every 100th of a second he would take like a screenshot or whatever of that video, put it in another place with a superimposing a nature background or something. Stuff like that. It was pretty cool. So you can do pretty cool stuff nowadays, and the usefulness of Silverlight and Flash and stuff like that is kind of going away. So how do spas work? Well, like I said, fat client, lean server. You want to give as much to the client as possible so that it can do all the rendering and all of the business logic and things like that. And then you only talk back to the server when you need to load new pieces of the application. Like, okay, if I'm making a JavaScript heavy site, maybe I have 50 JavaScript files. Maybe you don't want to load all 50 JavaScript files up at the first page load. Maybe you want to load it up only when you start clicking around to the parts that need those things. So the only time you ever talk to the server is when you need those little bits, or when you actually need to communicate with the database to go get some tiny information about your widget that you're trying to view on your site. So the server takes care of data storage, authentication, stuff like that. The client does as much of everything else as you can make it possibly do, so that it's performant and responsive as possible. Interaction causes modules to load, not pages. We need to emphasize that you are not serving pages from your server anymore. You don't do that. You don't build the HTML over here on the server and give them the finished product. You say, here are the pieces you need to figure it out yourself. So whenever you're doing interaction with your application, you end up loading whatever data you need, whatever new HTML templates in order to display the bits of data that you're getting, and any new scripts that you need. Pages are not generated by the server. The server has endpoints with which to interact. So when you want to actually do some sort of communication, if you want to change something, if you want to notify the server that something happened, or if you want to go get some data or send some data, you talk to an endpoint, you hit some sort of RESTful API, and you say, I'm going to change this widget because I have this new property that I want to send it to, and that's it. You don't have to post back with the whole, you know, it's so awesome, I can't even remember the term. What is when you post back a page, that stuff that sits there, start the V? View state, that's it. You don't have to post the whole view state back and goes through and is this a post back? You don't have to worry about that. You just say, I'm going to this one URL and I'm changing this one little thing. And if you need to have a response, you can get it whenever you get it. You don't have to wait for it. You just say, okay, go do that, go save my widget, and I'm going to go do some other stuff. And when you're done, let me know, and then I'll say, oh, hey, your widget got saved. Basic architecture. Now, each of these individual parts, like I was saying, SPA is not a single technology. It's not, you have to have these 6 things. If you don't have these 6 things, that's not a SPA. It is, in general, these are the kind of considerations that you might have if you're trying to build this kind of web application. You might not need to, for example, worry about your site being able to handle being offline. Maybe you don't need to worry about dependency resolution, loading, or bootstrapping because you don't have that complicated of a site. Okay, go ahead, take those parts out. But in general, the bigger you get, the more of these you're going to start including. So, step 1, kind of as you're loading things up, dependency resolution, loading, and bootstrapping. The bigger your application gets, the more than likely you're going to start running into trying to make sure the right things load at the right time. Now, the tiny little doofy apps I have, I could go ahead and load them all up at once because it's not like I spent 500 hours building huge, giant enterprise applications like John Papa did when he did his crazy 6.5-hour presentation for Perot site on single-page applications. He made this giant enterprise app, and it's like, I didn't get paid to do this, so I didn't do that. I just kind of slapped some stuff together. Anyway, so if you get really big, you're going to start saying, well, I don't want to load my 50 JavaScript files right away, because it might take a while. I don't want the page to take 5 or 10 seconds to load the first time you load it. So I'm just going to load up what you need when you need it. And after a while, you're probably going to need a scheme to figure out how to load what you need when you need it. Ajax, well, that's probably the only piece where I would say, yeah, you're going to need Ajax if you're going to call yourself a SPA. If you're not using Ajax, I don't see how you call yourself a SPA. All right, endpoints. Like I was saying before, an endpoint is how you're going to talk to the server. You're not going to go get a whole new page. You're not having that kind of communication with the server. You're just saying, there's some URL that's going to, where I give it the tiniest bit of information, and it's going to retrieve whatever I want, or it's going to do whatever little thing I needed, and then respond back whenever it's run. Templates, or MVC, by the way, is going to lend itself very well to this kind of technology. But you don't need to use MVC if you don't want to. Templates, binding, MVVM. Again, maybe you're going to use templates for binding, but maybe you're not using MVVM, whatever. But MVVM is going to be probably what you're going to be using. Now, templates, what I mean by that is, let's say you're going to display a whole bunch of widgets on your site, and instead of going to the server and getting your 10 widgets and building this huge HTML page by printing out this HTML 10 times with the widget information inside of it, you're going to go and you're going to get a tiny little snippet of HTML that is going to be your template for displaying each of the widgets. Whether you want to put that in a JavaScript file or an HTML file or what have you, you use that template, and then you go and you get a different endpoint. You're going to go grab your widget information, and you're going to get like JSON back or XML if you don't want to do things easily. So you get your JSON object, and then you take each of those objects and you plop it into the template and say, template, use this object to actually display it. Offline, like I said, if you're doing something like, let's say you're giving everybody, if you're running some sort of delivery service like USPS or something like that, everybody's got these mobile phones and they're tracking all the things that they're delivering, but maybe sometimes they get spotty coverage on their phones. So when they say, "Hey, I delivered this," and they scan the thing, maybe it can't talk to the server right away because it's offline, because they're in the middle of nowhere and they don't have good cell phone coverage. So you kind of save that information however you want. If it's a very small amount of information, maybe you just have it in JavaScript variables. But if it's sufficiently large, or if you have an enterprise application, maybe you want to use local storage, HTML5 local storage, or something similar. And then when they get back online, that syncs up and says, "Oh, by the way, those 3 packages were delivered." That kind of thing. And of course, testing. Who here has tested JavaScript before? One person. All right. The bigger your single-page application gets, the more you're going to start realizing you need to unit test your JavaScript. A lot of people are like, "Ugh, unit test JavaScript, are you kidding me?" Oh my God. Well, it's going to force you to start coding your JavaScript a little differently. Instead of saying, you got a script folder, you bring in jQuery and a couple other things, and then you make one big giant mysite.js, which is probably what a lot of us do. When you have a single-page application, especially if it's sufficiently large, like an enterprise application, you're going to want to start segmenting that into a lot of smaller files. And you're going to start realizing that you're going to want to start testing this. And there are testing frameworks for JavaScript. We'll get into a couple of those. All right, so we're actually going to start talking specifics now. We're going to 4:45, right? Okay. I still got about 9 hours of content. So, all right. So dependencies. We're talking about dependencies at the beginning, bootstrapping, things like that. The biggest one to think about is require.js. Very well used, very robust, and it efficiently loads scripts in a modular approach. It's going to help you figure out what to get and when to get it, and do that when you need it. So definitely suggest require.js. Now, mine was a little smaller, so I didn't actually use require.js. I'm using lab.js. Loading and blocking JavaScript, because it's a lot simpler, and I don't need everything that require.js brings to the table. But still, lab could work for you if you wanted to. And the idea is, until very, very, very recently, the most recent updated versions of browsers are a little bit better at this. But in general, when you say, okay, I need this JavaScript file, this JavaScript file, this JavaScript file, in order in your HTML page, in your header or whatever, you say I want these 5 JavaScript files, it goes and downloads them one at a time. That can kind of suck if you have like 10 JavaScript files. It won't get the second one until the first one is fully downloaded. Well, lab.js says you don't really need that, so if these don't require one another, then you can go make asynchronous calls and get 4 or 5 at a time. It's going to load things up a lot faster. But, of course, if you need to get them in order, then you can tell it, oh no, I really need jQuery before I start using this other library that requires jQuery. And then, as I said, if you're doing everything asynchronously like that, it's going to help you load your page a lot faster. Bundling. When you start getting to the point where you're like, oh, I have 50 different JavaScript files, you might want to bring a few JavaScript files or a few CSS files over at a time. in .NET, there is a quick, a new bundling thing in MVC that helps you plot these things together and get the starter JavaScript and the CSS files like that. Alright, so, I should probably mention minification as well. When you start getting really, really JavaScript and CSS heavy, you might want to go ahead and minify your files so that you bring less over the wall. Alright, Ajax. I'm sure we all know what that means. Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Then again, nowadays we're using a lot of JSON, so I wonder, Ajax? Asynchronous JavaScript and JSON. I don't know. Whatever. It's been around for a really long time. I'm sure we all know to some degree what Ajax is. Web applications are using it more and more and more. And it's developing to the point where it's more of a philosophy of using it, and that's why we come to the point of where we can start calling things single-page applications. Callbacks, it's an integral part of SPAs, and when you make a call to some web server somewhere, you do it asynchronously. You say, okay, go get this thing, or go do this thing, and when you're done, let me know. So you're going to start coming into the whole realm of callbacks. But if it gets a little complicated, or if you're doing things in parallel or whatever, I recommend jQuery promises. It takes a little while to wrap your head around it properly, but when you're done figuring out, it's very easy to use. And like I said, it allows you, if you're going to say, I want to do these 4 things because of all the things people are whipping around on my page doing, if you really have to wait for all 4 of them to happen, or this has to happen after these other 2 things happen, if you don't use promises, you have to start doing things like, when each of these callbacks come back, you have to check to see if the other ones were done. You have to start having all these global variables checking to make sure, oh, did I complete this? Did I complete that? That kind of thing. Did this get called yet? Did that get called yet? You don't have to worry about that with promises. Promises just say, well, when it's all done, then do this one thing. So, like I said, look into it. We don't have time to really get into it any further. Endpoints and MVC being kind of the main technology behind that. Endpoints, you get bits of data from the server at RESTful URLs. You say, get me the widget with an ID of 5, and it returns you a tiny little bit of JSON saying, here's the pertinent information for that widget. And it's going to be very quick, very responsive. You're not going to get this whole pre-built page, that kind of thing. Performs operations on models, gives responses, that kind of thing. If you need to save something, delete something, update, whatever it is, then you just tell it, here's what I need you to do, and if I need a response, you let me know what the response is whenever you're done. MVC lends itself very well to the architecture of the SPA. Backbone.js, like I mentioned before, JavaScript MVC is one that a lot of people are using, and one that just came out is something called Double Dollar, which is apparently in some sort of beta phase. But I thought it was pretty cool to mention. Here, I'll zoom in here. Right, so this right here is the entirety of the controller serving up basically a hello world example of Double Dollar. Double Dollar, okay, here's your home controller. If you know the MVC architecture, that should make sense to you. Here's one of the routes, default, kind of your index.html. You know, make a body tag with the HTML hello world. Pretty sweet. Think about it. And that's not just like your HTML page, that's your whole routing system. I thought that was pretty cool. Alright, so templates and binding. Pretty important to think about when you're talking about SPAs. So templates, no page loading. You're not getting a page built by the server and served to you. You are loading templates and data separately, and you're combining them on the front end. So you use templates to generate the content client side. jQuery templates are the one I've seen used most frequently. Apparently they have stopped development on it because they're going to do something better. I don't know why they're not just updating it, because I can't find anything better than jQuery templates. You can still use them. I'm using them. And the only good, decent competitor I found is JS Render, which is very similar to jQuery templates. If you knew jQuery templates, you could go right over to JS Render and you'd be able to pick it up very quickly. And you don't need to actually have jQuery to make it work. All right, for binding, when you start talking about MVVM, binding, things like that, you want to look at Knockout.js. Sadly, there are no Knockout talks for me, so I can't recommend it. But I do recommend looking up Knockout and finding out what it can do. I have a little demo or a little example on the next slide. But it's MVVM for JavaScript. It takes care of all the binding headings, and if you haven't worried much about trying to do binding, well, if you have, then you know that there's a lot of headaches if you don't use any sort of MVVM framework. So here's a quick example of Knockout. So up here at the top, we have a select, a little option thing. And we're not listing the actual options, if you notice, in the HTML. We just have a data bind property here, and the options are the whatever ticket says. That's weird. Well, tickets is down here, right here, your tickets view model. And you have name, economy, price 200, business 450, first class 1200. And these are different tickets for flying to wherever, right? And these are going to be your options. The caption, which is kind of like the top thing before you select anything, it's going to say choose. Ellipsis. The text is name. So whatever the name property is on the object that you've set to your options, that's going to be what you see in the dropdown. And the value is chosen ticket. The one that you selected is this thing down here. That KO observable is the thing that kind of makes kind of the magic happen as far as it paying attention to what gets selected. Down here, the apply bindings kind of turns everything on, so they actually start working. And any other print information. So the button here to clear the selection, it is enabled if the chosen ticket, if you've actually chosen it. If you haven't chosen one, it's not enabled. And when you click on it, you call reset ticket on the view model, which is this method, which empties out the chosen ticket, sets it to null. Now, if you notice, you're like, wait a second, how does that set it to null? It looks like it's calling the method and passing null. Well, that's kind of how this observable works. Instead of saying this.chosen ticket equals null, you say this.chosen ticket is set it null. Because if you set this.chosen ticket equals null, you wipe out the whole knockout stuff. So you don't want to do that. I think that's bad. All right. And then over here, for this is explaining what you've chosen. Again, data bind, that says, oh, it's a knockout thing. And you're using this chosen ticket object here. And you have chosen, use the name property of the chosen ticket to be written here. And then how the price is going to be the price property of the select item. And that, I mean, you don't have to do anything. After you've done that, you don't have to, there's no JavaScript like saying, okay, now that you've selected something, go set this HTML to that. It's all done for you. It's done. They select something, the UI gets updated. And the underlying value gets updated too. So it's ready to be sent back to the server if you need it to. All right, offline. Things should happen right away. Like I said, when you're like, okay, I don't like Mitt Romney, or I don't like Obama. And when you hit enter, it shows you what you just said, but it isn't like it posted back and then came back to you saying, okay, here's your comment. No, it just put your comment in your DOM and then sent it off to the server to go get updated so that your friends can go see what you said in 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. It should respond as if it really happened right now, but it will sync with the server whenever it's convenient, whatever. It might not need to, maybe because, like I said, maybe it's something totally important, like you're just playing a game or whatever, or maybe it can't because it's offline. So you keep everything in memory, in JavaScript variables, or local storage if you need to. Testing. Enterprise JavaScript applications need tests. Sorry, you're going to have to just come to grips with that. But like I said, if you have enterprise JavaScript, you're going to end up with spaghetti code, all right? It's pretty easy to get away, especially with IntelliSense, which is getting a lot better, of course, in your JavaScript, but still it's not as good as it is with C#. I don't know about VB. Personally, I haven't looked at it in a long time because, you know, I'm not masochistic, so I just ignore it. But anyway, so you don't get the full power of IntelliSense and be able to easily fix bad code that you get in C# or something. So what you are going to want to do is start putting in unit tests. And modularized apps like a SPA lend themselves very well to being unit tested because they have been broken down into tiny little bits. A lot of these different parts in your SPAs might be tiny little JavaScript applications that are only, or JavaScript files that are only 5, 10, 20 lines, whatever. Or your HTML for your template, for your widget, is only 5, 10, 20 lines. So it's already modularized pretty well, so you might as well unit test it anyway. Frameworks out there to help us. Sign-on.js, very great, very awesome. It will take care of stubbing, spying, and mocking everything. Used it, it's fantastic. So for example, if you've got a method, so you've got a file, a JavaScript file, and you're trying to test one of the methods, you're going to stub out anything you're not using, or mock out anything you're not using, and you're just going to test the one method, that kind of thing. And recently I ran into something called Jasmine.js. If you want to learn more about Jasmine.js, you can hop in a time machine and go back a couple hours to Brian Hogan's talk. But I don't know if we have any of those. All right, and of course QUnit. I'll actually show you QUnit. So I have used QUnit. I have not used Jasmine. But QUnit is pretty simple. If you look here, here is the, oh, this is when everyone would have said bingo. It's pretty funny. Minimal QUnit test setup. So here's your QUnit page, which ends up looking like this, by the way. And all you have to do is say, okay, here, go get me the QUnit CSS. Here's the QUnit.js, and here's test.js. This is where all of your tests actually are, right? Here's the div where all of the results are going to be plotted. And in your test.js, this is just a minimal hello world type example. You say, you're testing if 1 is equal to 1. Now, I don't have 3 equal signs, so it's going to equal true. And it doesn't type check at that point, and it says pass. So then when you load up the page, it runs everything in here, and will give you a report on all of your tests, like that. Pretty cool. Now, of course, you can do something a little more complicated than that, but, you know, you get the idea. And if you don't, well, I don't have enough time to explain it. All right, so, demos. So, at this point, I'm guessing it thinks I said everything. Yeah, it did. All right. So we're going to go over here. All right. Yep, it thinks I said everything. This has been listening every 10 seconds for things and been repolling it. So let's just reset it and clear it out. How about that? All right. Now, the whole thing's been reset. Now, this application doesn't know that, but whatever. So if I said single page application within, well, apparently it thinks this one. Now, give it 10 seconds, and it will re-update with single page application being checked, unless, there you go, huh? Very, very touchy. When I do this at home, it doesn't do it. Maybe it's the echo or something, I don't know. But when I do it at home, it's very, very good. It is not this touchy. And of course, yeah, when I click around here, if I click all words or spoken words, these are only the spoken words. And here are the unspoken words, which will apparently be getting dramatically smaller as things get along. And so if you look here, if I go to things on spoken words, look, boom, here we go. We have navigated after that pound, which means we're still on the same page. And when I do this and go over here to unspoken words, again, we have not left the page, we just went to a different area. So we are keeping track of this. I can go, you know, back and forward, things like that, even though it's on the same page. Wow. And all this stuff is being tracked. Now, this was the crappy thing I slapped together because I had a ton of stuff. And I made this nice speech recognition app for you and stuff. So here's a fully baked one that I found online and kind of brought it in. Again, we're always going to be on spot and HTML, so pay attention to that. And this is a multi-level backbone gallery. So we click on this particular category. Boom, we're here in this sub-album with this section, that kind of thing. Now I click on Adele or whatever. And buying this item might just take me to Amazon, so I want to do that. But if you notice right here, we are navigating. We aren't just loading things without trying to keep track of where we've been. So we can go back and forth, stuff like that. We're not just losing all of this. We are keeping track of it. And that's pretty much it for this one. So I think I'll just hop around over the code with the very short amount of time left. We got about 6 minutes. So let's see here. For that,
does it require push state? Those browsers to have push state capabilities in order to navigate forward and back, or not?
I think that maybe some of the like History.js might mitigate that for you. I'm not an expert, so I just kind of plopped it in and it worked. Anyway, so if you look here, let me get rid of all this here. Do one more here. Here is the gallery page here. Here's the HTML for it, very, very small. Now, one thing to notice here is they did a little bit goofy. They have the templates here on the homepage, right here, in the one page. They don't have a separate file for their templates. And here, let me just zoom in on that so you can look at it. And this is a jQuery template. And you can do it any way you want. You don't have to put it in a little script right here. But this is an example of how you can do it. You can put it in a separate script file. You can't just leave it as HTML in an HTML file. But a tiny little HTML file, 5-10 lines long. And here's the syntax. Again, can't get into too much, but I think you can understand. $, that's whatever it's bound, whatever it is that you're sending to the template. Attributes, property, image. That's going to be the URL for your source. And the artist, the title, the years, that kind of thing. And like I said, normally you might want to put this in a separate page or a separate JavaScript file, but you don't have to. And they chose to leave the scripts the templates right there in the spot page. So then, when they end up getting everything, they just tell it, go use this specific one with this ID to display all of the albums, sub-albums, whatever. And then down here, this stuff, there's just more templates. They have almost no code here. And down here we have the lab example. So, for example, we need jQuery to load before we get the jQuery templates. Underscore backbone it can be done asynchronously. But I need cache provider before gallery can load, because gallery uses cache provider. So I have to do it that way. And of course they all require jQuery, that's why jQuery goes first. Alright, moving on. So let's look at the actual gallery.js. We'll use that one instead of mine, so I have time for mine. And this one has a lot more comments and stuff. So there's the cache provider. Let's see. So we'll look at a backbone model. With Backbone, you have, like I said, it's MVC, right? So here is the model for a photo collection, right? That's where you should probably look at photo first. That's well, this head is a little too long. Here we go. All right, so photo, it's pretty simple. You just say, okay, we're going to start from the Backbone model and we're going to extend it, and it's going to have some function called sub-album, which returns C plus the gallery.current_sub. And a collection here is a Backbone collection of photos. And I can't get too far into it, but let's see. And we'll fall back to the not important to look at. Let's see here. Okay, so here's a view. Right, so views, models, controllers, right? Here's a Backbone view, and this is what when you go to, when you're trying to load this view because you're hitting a particular part of your app, this L here is basically like what element you're going to put this stuff into. And that's going to be main's going to be like your body tag or whatever. And init's template is going to be, remember that template, the templates we were looking at in the HTML page? That's the ID of it. So it's saying, go templateify that HTML, right? Then when we're actually going to render, which is kind of a built-in thing, we're actually going to render this view, remove fallbacks, just don't worry about it. And let's see, L.fadeout, so that's, again, the main thing, the div that we're putting this into. We're going to wipe it out, we're going to empty it out, because whatever was in there, it needs to be wiped out. Then we're going to fill it with the jQuery template, using that as the template, and this model is a list of albums or whatever, and we're giving it that information. So we give it these JSON objects and saying, here's your objects, now go use your template and apply your template to each of these different objects. And append all that HTML to click, right? Any questions? Yeah. That's just a different view when you're in a sub-album, when you're looking at individual photo, and then gallery. So if you notice what gallery is, it is a controller. I think, I'm actually forgetting what they're calling it now. This, in an older version of Backbone, they called it controller. I should look at what they're calling it. That's a laugh, but they're actually not calling it a controller. Anybody remember? Okay, I'll look at mine. What do you guys do for it? All right, so let's see. Router, there we go. I think they're saying it isn't fair to call it a controller per se. So nowadays they call it router, but the code's pretty much the same. All right, so here are your routes. If it just has pound, go to the index view. If you go subalbum ID, now that ID, if you notice that colon there, that's telling you something. That's going to be your. If you say subalbum/1, 1 is your ID. So go to this method and pass in the ID. If you go here, something like that. If you go here, something like that. That's just startup stuff where you kind of build. I kind of built all these promises. Apparently, originally it didn't quite work, and I had to put in promises, which was cool because then I can show you what they look like. Anyway, so you're adding all these promises together, and then you can kind of track. So you can take a look at them later to see if they've loaded before you do what you need to do later on. Right. So here's the index method. If you go to the index page, you load up. You make sure that the promises are done, and if they're done, go ahead and render the index view. And same thing, pretty much right here. It's not a big deal as far as what else is happening. I'm trying to see if there's anything noteworthy to mention. Backbone history, that's. Is there anything else somebody wants to take a look at? We're out of time, so I don't want to keep you over anymore. I'm going to make everything available. Over here, we'll finish up the last slide. Okay, one last slide. Oh, it's really important. It's super cool. All these cool things, you gotta check out HTML9 responsive Bullinger.js. Super cool, right? Come on, do it. Here you go. Here it is. All right, cool. Oh, you guys haven't pulled it yet, right? Well, this should do it. H9 RVS is a flexible, dependency-free, lightweight, device-agnostic, modular, baked-in component framework, MVC library, shoelace step to help you kickstart your response to CSS-based app architecture, backbone, kitchen, sink, keyboard. All right. So, why'd you create it? Well, this is your granddaddy's framework. That should cover it, right? Also, it's cross-universe compatible. I mean, come on. How do you install it? Well, come on, you stupid. Just attack, clone, read code, push merge, new regen, the Node.js warm module. That's it. That's all you gotta do. So I totally recommend checking that one out. All right, so I think we're all done. Q&A. Remember, hold on a minute here. Softballs only. Softballs only. Okay. Comments? Anything at all? Remember? Okay, so we can't think of any softballs. Okay, cool. All right, so here are the references. This very PowerPoint deck, the one that I actually have a link to the PowerPoint inside itself. How'd I do that? And of course, John Papa had this crazy 6.5 hour single-page application thing. Technically speaking, the only one you really need to write down is this one, because if you go download this, you can get this whole thing. So you don't have to write down any different URLs. And of course, you want to learn what they really are about. And the gallery thing, that's from here, this URL here. And of course, Knockout.js and Backbone. Right? Oh, and well, I made fun of talking about politics, but whatever. Feel free to throw your vote away on Gary Johnson. That was my vote.